going. I hope. Um, I'm trusting and Shy to get that going. She's on top of it. She's the best producer ever. So I appreciate that, UXUX. Thank you. So we need more Richard Wolves and Slavoj. Zizek. I can never say his name, but I like Zizek. He's pretty solid. Supreme Court. Yeah, dude. So yeah, Shy's got to back up because she's a rock star. So I do find that interesting, right? I was looking at them mobilize like security down to the Supreme Court today. I was like, why do they look more prepared, and why is there more security for the Supreme Court right now than there was on January 6th for our election? It's like, that's funny. No, it's not really a big win, Junk Master, because they didn't win anything. They don't know, right? So I would ask you, like, what do you think is an important aspect when we're considering like who should or shouldn't get rights? Because whether we like to admit it or not, we do that as a society, right? We already strip people of their rights when they're living. You know what I'm saying? So like, we can't get this shit right for the living, but for a group of people who expect nothing of you because they're not people, they're just zygotes, they're just clumps of cells, right? They don't have feelings, they don't have consciousness, they don't have a thought process, they don't actually care one way or the other. You're a great advocate for them, right? You really care. But again, they expect nothing of you. So it's easy to care, right? That's why it's virtue signaling, right? So, for example, like when something really bad happens in the world and people go, oh, thoughts and prayers, or they put up their Facebook banner, or right, or they make like their, Facebook picture have a picture of the flag or something like that of the country that's harmed. They don't actually care, right? They just want to give off the appearance of caring. But are they putting their time towards that? They putting their money towards that? They putting their efforts towards it? Nah, probably not. Some are, but for the most part, nah. So I haven't seen Dem so angry since slavery was abolished. Wow, that's a funny one. That's a good one. How long did it take you to come up with that one? Straight off the PragerU propaganda board. You do know there's a party switch, right? Which is irrelevant because both parties are trash can, right? One's just significantly worse than the other, right? So like when you're taking out the trash, Dems, it's a bag, right? You could tie it up and take it out. Republicans, the bottom is broken out. It's like, oh man, what is this, right? It's like leaking and it's all over the place. So like there's levels to trash, like there's levels to shit, like there's levels to bad. So boom, 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 boom. Getting parents' basement vibes. I'd be down to live in my parents' basement right now, save some freaking money. Shit, my parents are nice people. That'd be fun. Nah, bro. Tell Dave I want my look back. You got it flip flopped. Adada, why so emotional? For starters, I'm actually not very emotional. I find it really interesting how every time you guys hear something you don't like, you try to reduce it to emotion. But bear with me. Let's walk you through this one. But let's say I was very emotional right now. Abortion's a recognized human right. So when people are stripping others of their human rights, we should be emotional. We should be angry. We should care. That should bother us, right? Because we're thinking, feeling human beings who have empathy, right? Unlike the unborn, and that's what separates people from the unborn, right? Feelings, life. Right? Because if we didn't have feelings, we'd just be fucking drones. That wouldn't be fun, would it? There'd be no meaning. So don't shit on feelings so quickly, man. It's an important aspect of life. Yeah, no, I got a birthmark. Born with it. All good there. Appreciate the concern or the troll, either way. No, it is a human right. Just because the United States of America doesn't recognize it doesn't mean it's not a human right. It's a recognized international human right that some countries are cool with and some countries shit on. Hi, baby. I know. I'll be your drone if you'll be my queen. No, see, I think men can have an opinion on this. I actually really vehemently disagree when people say, oh, like, men can't have an opinion. That's really silly, right? So, like, if I'm seeing someone and she gets pregnant, right? Like, I think that impacts me to some level. I think I should have an opinion, right? We're gonna have a conversation. As a man, I just have to recognize it impacts her way fucking more, right? Like I don't have to go through the pregnancy, so I don't have to deal with the physical realities of that. I don't have to deal with the emotional realities of that, right? Also, like we know that men kind of do skip out more often on this because because they don't have the physical reality, right? So this conversation is way more impactful for women, right? Really, just people who have the capability to have a child, right? So, no, I don't think men shouldn't take part in the conversation. We just should learn when to shut the fuck up and listen to the more relevant party. And if our opinion like really, really contrasts with the most relevant party, we should probably talk less. So, sir, aren't you aware that both sides? What would make you think that I'm not? Just because I'm pro-choice doesn't make me a Democrat. I've never been a registered Democrat at any point in my life. I was actually a registered Republican once upon a time. Fun fact. Now I'm an independent. How is it a human right? Because international bodies have declared it so. To your point, simply calling something a human right doesn't make it so. But things like healthcare, which would include abortion, education, access to food and water, right? Shelter, these things should be human rights. The basic necessities of life should be human rights because we can provide them if we wanted to, right? If we wanted to as a society, we could provide these things and then let the cards fall where they may, right? If everyone had like a decent starting point, from there the game's fair. You do what you can, right? You have to make your decisions. And if it doesn't work out for you, it doesn't work out for you. But some people don't even have a fair starting point, and then we condemn them because things don't work out for them. So who's against your choice on vaccine? Make any choice you want, right? While you have a choice, killing a beating heart is murder. That's interesting. Let's explore that point. Killing a beating heart is murder. So you don't eat meat, right? Because animals have beating hearts. Or do you differentiate between animals and humans, right? And if so, why do you differentiate between them? Because it's not heartbeats. We both have heartbeats. It's not suffering. We both suffer. It's not pain. We both have pain. Although, guess what? Fetuses don't feel anything at that point in time and not have pain. So, what is it then that allows you to believe in what you believe as it relates to animals, but believe what you believe as it relates to abortion? Because it's inconsistent as hell logic. That's strong. That's funny. Facts, right? So any self-defense would be murder too, then, right? Police are murdering people left and right, then, right? Oh, I have lots of a clue, Ken. Big, big clue. More clue than you. I actually don't know what point. I go with the 22-week mark, though. It's like my cutoff, right? I don't support abortion past 22 weeks, barring like certain circumstances. And then there's viability anyway, so it's typically going to be a pregnancy, just with like serious complications, right? But at 22 weeks, you have the structures in place for consciousness. And I think consciousness is what drives personhood, right? Consciousness at the level we experience as humans. It's why if someone's brain dead and there's no capability for them to like regain their functioning, anything like that, it's why we allow for them to be taken off of life support and things like that. It's why we distinguish between, eating meat and things like that. It's because of consciousness, right or wrong. So says the guy with pronouns. Why do pronouns bother you guys so much? Like, why do you guys cry so much about that? Like, it literally doesn't impact your life. Like, it doesn't hurt you. Like, I promise you, when you wake up, pronouns don't hurt you. So why do you cry about it so much? Like, the pronoun criers are like the modern day snowflakes. Like, transphobes are the modern day snowflakes. Because you guys know what snowflakes were once upon a time, right? You guys know where that term actually originates, the word that conservatives love to project with. The original snowflakes, the term comes from 1850s, okay? So during the abolition period, there were really emotional white people who didn't like the abolition movement. They were opposed to it, and they were called snowflakes. So I think a comparable group today would be transphobes, anti-vaxxers, things of that nature, right? People who don't do well with science, snowflakes. They'll never understand. Some people are really impressive in their deep-rooted ignorance. I haven't seen Umbrella Academy. Pronouns actually aren't virtue signaling, though. I used to think that. So, real talk. I used to think that, and then someone explained it to me far better than I ever could. If everyone's using pronouns, it actually eliminates the ability for the transphobes to pick out um, trans people, right? Because we're all just utilizing pronouns. She explains it way better than I do. But basically, I was like, oh shit, I thought it was just kind of virtue signaling. But no, it actually eliminates the ability to target and harass people if we're all doing it. So, you got a lot of hair for a 14-year-old girl. Where'd you come up with that one? Put a lot of thought into it, huh? Impressive. That's a good joke. Well played. Top notch. A+ humor. How do we get past this great divide? For starters, we have to recognize that divides aren't always bad. I think there's some things we should divide ourselves from, right? Like if we're divided over like, I don't know, trivial things, that's silly. But if we're divided over, like white supremacy, or if we're divided over, trans people's right to exist, if we're divided over the LGBTQ community in general and their rights, if we're divided over healthcare for women and their rights, if we're divided over how to treat refugees, if we're divided over how to treat immigrants, like, yeah, fuck that. People are on the wrong side of that. We should divide ourselves from their bullshit, right? Like, so for starters, we have to embrace the divide, in my opinion, right? Actually embrace it, not just question it or cry about it, but embrace the idea that we should divide ourselves from some shit stains within the society, and we should make them fucking uncomfortable, right? Because they do everything in their power to poke people who don't look and sound like them and try and make them uncomfortable. So we have to up it. There's more of us than them, right? So if we took this shit to heart, if we took this rage we feel right now about abortion, for example, and we channel that towards productive ends, we can make them fucking feel uncomfortable, and then they'll be chasing their safe spaces. So cut that hair. Nah, dude. Every time someone says cut that hair, I let it go for a month longer. That's the rule. Add another tally. One more month now. You did this. They're not even pro-fetus, dude. They're not pro-life. They're not pro-fetus. They're pro-white supremacy, unwittingly, most of them, and they're pro-forced birth, right? They're pro the idea that women are just incubators. And exactly, abortion wasn't an issue until it became 70s, I think, is when they started pushing it. Also, maybe before that, 60s, I don't know, man. But also, yeah, look at a lot of countries that have a religious base. They have different takes on abortion, right? So what'll be interesting to see is how different religious groups that are more open to open to abortion based upon their religious interpretation, try to push back on this. Because the reality is, if you're going to outlaw abortion, you're infringing upon people's religious rights as well. So I'm actually pretty pro do what you want with the vaccine, right? You just have to respect businesses that make their own decisions in terms of what can and come through their door, right? So same way a business can say, hey, you got to wear shoes and a shirt and some pants if you want to come in here. They can say, hey, you got to wear a mask if you want to get in here, right? Same way schools have like literally always required like a vaccine schedule to attend them, right? This is nothing new in that sense, right? In terms of public areas, healthcare fields, stuff like that. This is like literally nothing fucking new. Like it's nothing fucking new. Hmm. All right, see that can get the block. Anyways, Clarence Thomas left out the one law that's gonna be affected by this. I wonder why. Right? Yeah, you don't have to work somewhere that requires a vaccine. Exactly, right? Free to go work somewhere else. People don't mind getting a flu shot because for starters, with COVID, you had a president that didn't take it seriously at first, right? He downplayed it, made a mockery of it, and then you have his cult following that's just gonna go with what he says. Real talk, as a collective, be it Democrats or Republicans, we didn't do enough to support people. So while COVID did present like a real danger to people, right? It was a public health crisis. We also left a lot of people by the wayside when it came to their jobs, their businesses, and stuff like that. And whether Democrats and liberals, for the most part, want to admit this or not, most people aren't going to see a difference between dying from COVID and dying from being able to put food on your table, right? So if someone loses their job and they can't pay their bills, they don't know how they're going to feed their kids. Like, yeah, I'm probably going to risk getting COVID in that scenario too, right? Like a lot of people weren't in the economic position to be able just not to fucking work without support, and we didn't adequately support everybody. So when you're someone who's in a bad spot, that type of propaganda, type of rhetoric, it's going to sink in really easily. So we didn't take that shit seriously as a society. And I don't fully blame a lot of people for their views on COVID, but it's still stupid nonetheless. What happened with Trapped? So what happened with Trapped was I had my ticket. I got there. It was June 19th. They scanned my ticket. They took my ID. They scanned that too. And as I was walking in, the guy's like, "Whoa, whoa! I actually can't let you in, man. You're that multimedia guy." And then they asked to talk outside with me. We had a little chit chat. They claimed that it wasn't Trapped who told me I couldn't come in. It was someone else, a third party, who had alerted them. I'm not sure if I believe that or not. But long story short, I was there. They didn't let me in. And then while I was walking around, I'd walk by the tour bus and shit, and they would never come out or nothing like that. And pretty anticlimactic. Yeah. It doesn't have a 99.99% survival rating for sure, for starters. So there's that. Would you say one of the biggest issues in the nation is education? Yeah, absolutely. We train people to be workers, not to be thinkers, not to be people who are able to kind of analyze, critically take in information and then come to conclusions on their own in a healthy way, right? So, Soy Boy Bob Ross. I'm cool with that. You can call me Soy Boy Bob Ross. I like Bob Ross. It's like that's like not an insult. They said they're going to refund me. I don't think I've got refunded yet. So there's that. Kind of annoyed about that, but whatever. It's $25. Not a big deal. I like Katie Porter. I don't know her too well, but whenever she pops up, it seems like she's saying the right things. What about you? I don't know if amicable is ever going to be in the works because we're already seeing I think we're already seeing an increase of violence in terms of mass shootings, domestic terrorism, stuff like that. But we'll see, right? But yeah, education is a huge issue. I mean, here's why that's a difficult topic. I don't think anyone disagrees with that, right? You won't find Republicans or Democrats or liberals or conservatives or socialists or communists or anarchists or any group. Like no group really going to be like, "Oh yeah, America's getting education right." Like that's not a thing, right? The problem is how do we go about that? You know what I'm saying? And there's a lot of disagreement there. Um, so that's the problem. Is like how do we achieve a society with better educational outcomes? And I would argue, for starters, maybe switch up how we do things as it relates to property taxes, and like local taxes driving education, right? That's a start. Obviously, we have to have a real conversation about what's history in this country and why are some of our outcomes that we see today the way they are. So depending upon who writes your history books, you're gonna have a really different version of education, probably. Like all these things matter. So, oh look, a cultist. That's cool. I kind of pity the Trump cult. Like most days, they piss me off, but some days I pity them. It's like this is a group. It's kind of funny, right? So this is a group of people who typically are really anti the elites, anti Hollywood, anti like the big rich ones and all this shit. But it's like, dude, Trump is like literally the definition of like a Hollywood, like glitz and glam magazine politician who's an elite, who's out of touch with the people. Like the definition of it. But they flock to him, right? Because populism sells. And not that there's anything wrong with populism necessarily, but populism sells. Haven't lost the plot since '92, bro. That's it, right? It's the ugly rhetoric that they liked. Can we just acknowledge that Matt Walsh is a terrible human being? I'm getting so sick of that. Like, what is a woman? Like, you haven't done anything, bro. You just showed that you're transphobic and you're utilizing a fucking whistle to target a marginalized group. You're displaying your own hatred. Why? Like, if you look at like the 14 points of fascism, if you look at how fascism has come to be in countries, the sad part is we are checking so many of those boxes right now. It's like our rhetoric as it relates to like gender, as it relates to LGBTQ, right? Our rhetoric as it relates to media, our rhetoric as it relates to democracy and elections, right? Like our praise of these freaking political figures, right? Like the demigod status, like demagogue status. It's like these are like we're really checking all the boxes, bro. It's fucking insanity. And history shows you what happens. Like we have history to look at. That's why I think it's kind of funny. People say hindsight's 2020. Bullshit. It is not. I vehemently disagree with that. Because if it was, we wouldn't keep repeating the same mistakes, right? Rob Moss, I like that too. Why don't you move, bro? Because I'm gonna stick here and try and change things, man. Why would I leave? I'm gonna try and stay here and change things. I'm not an abandoned ship kind of guy. Also, the United States drives a lot of things globally, right? We're the predominant superpower. So if we can change things here, we can make things a lot better abroad as well. Exactly. Why leave rent free in the basement? That's what's up. It's like it's the same five things. Lately, it's what's a woman? Oh, basement. Oh, CNN. What am I missing? Like usually something about Screech or something. Like you guys say the same shit, dude. It's actually kind of sad. Every once in a while, some of you guys have a good troll. You have a good insult. I'm actually proud of you. I'm like, dude, that's unique. You put some thought into that. Nice. Why do the owners of major media companies push such insane agendas? Can't talk. What's up, Big Joe? How you doing, bro? Good to see you, man. That's a fair question, kind of. Like, I mean, for starters, we have to recognize that, like, not all media is the same, right? When we just say media at large, it's a little reductive. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that your big corporate media outlets, right, your legacy media outlets are doing one of two things, right? With Fox, they're promoting this really toxic brand of American exceptionalism, right? They're promoting white nationalism. If you're looking at like the CNNs, the MSNBCs, right, ABC, NBC, CBSs of the world, they're definitely promoting U.S. imperialism, right? So that's why it's like you gotta take your news, you gotta take your information for what it is. You gotta understand the bias at play. You gotta understand the perspective at play. And once you understand the perspective, you might be able to pull out decent information from it. But a lot of that's predicated upon how fact-based their approach is too. So, but again, dude, a lot of this is about what we do with our own media climate, right? We have the ability now to like have conversations with who we want for the most part, to access information how we want, where we want, when we want. So a lot of like our media like comes back to us as individuals and how we want to utilize it, because there's a massive paradigm shift. So like if you look at how we take in information and how information moves in our society, there's been a huge shift in like the last 20 years, especially the last 10 years with the kind of rise of social media. And with that rise, we as individuals are more injected into the information climate and the media climate than ever before. So a lot of this falls on us as individuals, and we don't recognize that responsibility yet. So Jacob, conservative. Dude, how many accounts do you have right now, dude? Jeez, you be getting hit with the bans too? I don't understand how men have a say in whether a woman wants to bear a child. I can't understand it. Well, that's a silly take, in my opinion. So, like I talked about, if my girlfriend gets pregnant, that decision, one way, like whether she decides to keep the fetus or abort the fetus, her decision is going to impact me. So, on the individual level, men should have some opinion on the matter. But yeah, ultimately, no fucking doubt about it. Like, women should have the final say because it impacts them more. Right? I can offer an opinion, I can be part of the conversation, but it's not my decision, no doubt about it. But to gatekeep the conversation from people who will be involved to some degree is kind of silly. It just creates animosity amongst this group of people, in my opinion, who like can't handle like rejection or can't handle being kept out of things. So I think you'd be better off like creating an inclusive dialogue that tries to help people recognize where their place is within the conversation, right? Just my fucking take though as a dude. Take it for what it is. But like obviously I recognize men aren't going to deal with the emotional or physical realities of pregnancy. So no doubt about it, women need to lead this conversation because it ultimately comes down to them and their healthcare provider. So I mean, I actually agree, dude. I think that if someone has the decision to terminate a pregnancy, someone should have the ability to opt out financially. Like, I agree with, right? Because, like, let's say you sleep with someone and you have an unintended pregnancy. If they decide to keep that pregnancy, my life's going to look very different for at least the next 18 years. Really, the rest of my life if I'm a decent parent, right? If I actually give a fuck. Um, so, oh, resist coming in hot. What's up, dude? Does HIPAA fall because of this? That's a good question, Dutch. Above my pay grade. That's a good question when you consider some of the ramifications of Roe v. Wade. Ari, come here. Come here, baby. Ari, come here. Boom, 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 boom. If I'm legally held responsible for a child, I believe I should have a say to an extent within reason. Yeah, I agree with that, Randy. Like again, I agree with that position. I just think as men, we should recognize that it's not wrong for women to have a way larger voice in this conversation because this does impact them more, no doubt about it. So it's like have our opinion, but also learn when to concede space and when to shut the fuck up. Wizard, I'm inclined to agree with that position. By the way, all pro-life positions are inherently hypocritical. I was saying something to that effect earlier before I got off because of connection issues. I don't really think there's an angle you can take as it relates to pro-life, especially if it's based on religion that's going to work. Whether you want to talk about it in terms of like legality with the Constitution and religious freedom, right? Privacy, bodily autonomy, liberty, life, all these things. Yeah, I think you're gonna have a hard time, like a really hard time. If you want to talk about pain or suffering, things like that, it's definitely gonna be hypocritical and not accurate, right? If you want to look at, and they always love to cite like life, like biologists. It's like, okay, 86% of biologists, I think 87% actually, 87% of biologists are pro-choice. So it's like, what do you like? It's like, it's just a really difficult position to defend. Unless someone says, for me and mine, we ourselves were pro-life, but we totally understand it's a personal decision, and everyone, every couple, every woman has to make the decision that's right for them, right? That okay, fair, right? But then you're still probably pro-choice, so. Thank God you have the laws of God to give you free speech. God doesn't give me free speech. The Constitution and subsequent jurisprudence gives me free speech, right? So, for example, even when the Constitution came about, what free speech looked like in that version of America is dramatically different than what it looked like in 1900 and is dramatically different than what it looks like right now, right? So there's a free speech standard that's shifted, I believe, 3 times in the last 250 years, right? And we can thank people like the socialists for that. I always love to point that out. Around the 1910s, right, you had a lot of socialists and anti-capitalists who were pushing back against the move towards World War I, right, and pushing back against the capitalist agenda. And a lot of times they get arrested for things like sedition and stuff like that, right? So anti-draft people get arrested and stuff like that. And while they lost those court cases, some of those dissenting opinions formed the foundation for the shift in a greater range of free speech as a society, right? So these things come from the Constitution and our collective and our agreement to these things, right? And the rights that we allow for ourselves, defend, and then see doesn't come from God. Which God, for starters? Your God? My neighbor's God? That dude down the street, his God? That's silly. I think the pro-life position, and I don't think it's a good faith position for starters, but I think the pro-life position, if you want to be good faith, is there's people who think they're protecting the potential to personhood. That's how I would say, right? So so I'll concede the limitation in my view is that we're still intervening in a timeline where we prevent potential personhood, right? So I think the pro-life position is that we're trying to protect the right to life for those who can't speak for themselves. I think that's probably fair. Thanks, Stacey. Appreciate that. Also, what's interesting about Islam in this conversation is within Islam, they don't believe like in ensoulment until 4 months in, I believe, 120 days. Like I think Israel is largely pro-life, or pardon me, pro-choice, for example. So I kind of agree. I don't consider it pro-life, but I try to be fairly charitable. But it's pro-forced birth, man. Let's be real. When you look at the actual outcome. So, what's up, Rachel? Welcome in. But the thing is, like, okay, like let's look at real world outcomes. Like, let's just look at real world outcomes. What happens in areas where you have anti-abortion legislation? What typically happens? Like, what's usually going to be accompanied by that mindset? You'll actually have an increase in pregnancies and you'll have an increase in abortions because typically the anti-abortion mindset is also going to be anti-condoms, anti-contraceptives in general, right? They're going to be anti a lot of these things, anti-sex ed. They're going to be anti the very things that lead to less unintended pregnancies, which means less abortions, right? And look at a Planned Parenthood, for example. Okay, let's say Planned Parenthood performs 500,000 abortions in a year. You don't like that. You think that's bad. But they prevent many more abortions and many more pregnancies than that every year. So, in your chase to get rid of a Planned Parenthood, for example, you're taking away a resource that actually leads to less pregnancies and less abortions, despite the abortions they perform, because those abortions are going to happen anywhere. You're not going to legislate away abortions. It's not going to fucking happen because it's a real world need, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. So, and so everyone's like, oh, we should all agree that like we should try to reduce abortions. Okay, great. Let's all agree on that. Then let's give people access to the very fucking things that reduce abortions. I like that point there, Emma. Who's God? And how's God always winning? And which God's always winning? Zeus didn't win. Not many people believe in him. I don't think the Egyptian gods are doing too well here in America. Not many people believe in them. How are the Roman gods doing? The Norse gods? Come on, man. Can we successfully impeach several of these justices? Probably not. We don't know what created life. So, to that point, we can only point to what creates our individual life, which would be our parents. And yeah, it's a woman who's giving birth to us. So, my hairbrush is doing okay. Thanks for asking. Why would I waste time on a hairbrush? I just take a shower and shake it out and roll with it. Going to school at Sac State, been paused. I only have 3 classes left, so I'm done. Been paused since the pandemic started. But I study communications with an emphasis in mass media, interpersonal communications, conflict res a little bit. I'm missing one small groups, organizational comms, stuff like that. And then I also dabble in philosophy because I fucking love philosophy. So, Ken, you might have missed it, but I think that men should have the ability to opt out. But ultimately, the father's not going to have to deal. So, when we're talking about rights, like, so for example, if there's a situation and we both people share like equal consequences in terms of like the action, then they should have equal rights or equal say, right? But if one party is going to carry a larger responsibility, they should probably have more rights and they should probably have more of a say in that conversation. And so women have to actually carry the child, right? They have to deal with the physical reality of that during and after. They have to deal with the emotional reality during and after. Men don't have to deal with that. So while I think it's fair to say, what about men's rights within this conversation? If that's just like the simple rebuttal, it's like, nah. Until women have rights, I'm not really concerned about men's rights within this conversation. You know what I'm saying? Once women have adequate rights within this conversation, then we can talk about making sure things are fair for men and the remainder of the conversation. So, but like, I'm always going to focus on like the bigger problem, you know? So like the example I use when I'm talking to conservatives, I'm like, well, what about like, they'll be like, what is it? They'll be like, well, like, what about like instances of like false accusations of racism? I'm like, yeah, that's not good. But like a far bigger issue in our society is still racism. So why don't we focus on that, work on that, you know? And then once we get to a good place on that, then we could talk about the false accusation thing, right? Sure. You know, but like you got to address the main problem, you know? mm, I don't know that people should be forced to have a financial obligation though. Like, I'm not sure, man. Like, if someone has, so here's the thing, if someone has the ability to terminate that potential person, right? Should someone else then be obligated to, like financially to that potential person based upon the decision of another? Like, I don't know about that. I'm not sure. So that's fair, SD. That's fair, right? Both should have to like men should. Okay, that's fair. If you're gonna get an abortion, like then, but here's the problem with this conversation too, man. Like to your point, so yeah, women have to bear the financial burden right when they get pregnant, right? And the problem is like you can't always tell the man in these situations that you're going to get an abortion for a variety of reasons, right? If it's a product of SA, if it's a really abusive situation, things like that, you don't want them to know necessarily, obviously, right? And so you can't even like go to them for the financial aspect of this. So that's the other tough part of this conversation, man. Is like it's easy to have this conversation if we assume it's like um, two people like in a committed, healthy relationship making a decision, but that's not like the scenario every time. So just got a message from my white friend who said, "Sounds like they shouldn't be your white friend anymore." Maybe like and this. I'll give you the example, man. It's like I grew up believing things like that, right? Because I was like, "Oh, Obama's president," when I was like, because Obama became president when I was black president. Like, America's not racist. Why we vote for a black guy? I used to think that systemic racism didn't exist. I used to subscribe to those really silly whatabouts, those racist whatabouts, in terms of like crime and fatherhood and things like that, right? And so I realized over time as I adjusted and switched from these views, some people are willing to confront the ugly beliefs they hold, and some people aren't. And you probably shouldn't be friends with people who aren't willing to confront their ugly views, right? If you think people have room to change and grow, then I'd say be patient with them, maybe. But I think some people need to be cut off, and they don't really deserve our energy or efforts if they're not really going to kind of be receptive, right? So, just my take, though. Also, I do got to get going in a second. I'm going to meet up with a friend in a little bit. So, you're about to find out they want us in the kitchen. I don't even know what that comment means. Yeah, if someone's unwilling to change their view, then why put energy into that? Exactly. No, you're right, though. I'm on the West Coast. I'm in Sacramento. Northern California, though, not Southern. I wouldn't have believed before Trumplicans, but now I totally agree with you. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. Like, a lot of the Republicans I grew up with, even some of them descended into this Trump stuff, but a lot of them are now just like centrists, or like they don't fuck with the Republicans, but they still are so like anti-left or anti, not the liberals or the left in my opinion, but they're so anti-liberal or anti-Democrats for good reason. Oftentimes they can't cross over. I just went from right all the way, bypassed liberals and Dems, and landed in the leftist camp because liberals and Dems kind of suck, to be honest. But again, I'm not comparing them to the conservatives. I'm just saying they do kind of suck for what they are. Yeah, dude, that was eye opening, man. It was like the birther movement. I was like, yo, I don't like Obama. Like, I was like, what, a teenager? I was like, I don't like Obama. Like, I'm not sure about this, dude. This seems a little much. Like, this seems pretty overt. All right, the hair routine is I have some 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner. I hop in, I wet it down, I put my shampoo in, I scrub a dub dub, I get out, I shake it out. And that's that. I haven't read Clarence Thomas's opinion on Roe. Oh shit! Are you talking about like the extension of some of his things on other other things as it relates to like same-sex marriage and stuff like that? Because yeah, I saw some of that, but I haven't read it specifically or directly. Just analysis on it. My honest thoughts on the latest Supreme Court decision is that in terms of like if we're just analyzing this through a constitutional lens, like a purely constitutional lens, um, maybe not the greatest reasoning. I'm totally willing to concede that. But if we're talking about like the pragmatic result of things and how this has been a standard for 50 plus years now, doing away with it is just fucking silly on so many levels. Like, and silly is being charitable. So I don't know, man. Constitution needs to be trashed. Fact. Anyways, it's about time for me to hop off. So I'll try and hop back on live maybe tomorrow. Um, while you guys are here, check out the YouTube page. Got a lot of good content up there. We've had like different interviews, different panel discussions with a lot of awesome content creators. We usually run Mondays and Fridays at 6 o'clock Pacific time, 9 o'clock Eastern. So go check it out, youtube.com/mute the media. Subscribe, There's some good content up there. If you want to buy some merch, check out mutethemedia.org. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, not really on Twitter, but I'm there. And yeah, appreciate you guys hopping in. Hope you guys all have a great night. And of course, remember to mute the media.